Captain Jake Morrison crouched behind the twisted remains of a hover transport, its quantum engine still sparking intermittently with residual energy that made his teeth ache. The ruins of New Geneva stretched around them like broken teeth against the crimson sky, a testament to humanity's stubborn refusal to stay dead even when half the galaxy wanted them extinct. Contact left, 200 meters. Sergeant Martinez shouted over the whine of plasma fire. The Vorthack had appeared out of nowhere, their insectoid form skittering across the rubble with predatory grace, energy weapons painting deadly light shows across the skeletal remains of what used to be Earth's most progressive city. Jake's squad was pinned down hard. What should have been a simple reconnaissance mission had turned into a nightmare the moment they'd stepped off their dropship. The Vorthack weren't supposed to be anywhere near this sector, yet here they were, hitting his unit with military precision that suggested this wasn't a random encounter. Morrison. Private Chen's voice cracked with adrenaline. My rifle's overheated. I need 30 seconds. 30 seconds they didn't have. Jake counted muzzle flashes, at least 12 hostiles, probably more moving to flank them. His squad was good, but they weren't miracle workers, and the Vorthack had superior numbers and positioning. The communications array buzzed with static. Alpha Base, this is Recon 7 requesting immediate extraction. Nothing but electronic snow answered him. The jamming field was too strong. A plasma bolt sizzled past his ear, close enough to singe his hair. Jake returned fire, watching his shots splash harmlessly against Vorthack energy shields. They needed a miracle, or at least air support, or maybe just a really big distraction. The sky obliged him. Something silver streaked overhead like a falling star, moving too fast and too controlled to be debris. Jake watched it arc downward with the kind of trajectory that spoke of deliberate targeting rather than uncontrolled descent. The impact crater it left was perfectly circular, smoking with energy discharge that made the air shimmer. For a moment, the battlefield went quiet. Even the Vorthack seemed curious about this new development. Then the smoke cleared, and Jake's world tilted sideways. The figure that emerged from the crater moved with liquid grace, power armor gleaming like mercury under the alien sun. The suit was sleek, organic-looking, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Advanced didn't begin to cover it, this was technology that made Coalition standard gear look like stone tools. But it was the way she moved that made Jake's breath catch. That particular tilt of the head when assessing threats, the predatory grace he'd seen in training exercises years ago, the economical movements that wasted no energy. He knew that body language better than his own reflection. The armored figure raised what looked like liquid silver that somehow solidified into a rifle, and the Vorthack position erupted in contained fury. Energy beams that bent light itself carved through their shields like they were paper, each shot placed with surgical precision. No wasted ammunition, no flashy heroics, just efficient, devastating effectiveness. Holy shit, Martinez breathed. Who is that? Jake couldn't answer. His throat had suddenly developed the consistency of desert sand. The mystery warrior moved through the Vorthack formation like death-given form, weapons appearing and disappearing from her armor as needed. A particle cannon materialized from thin air to deal with their heavy gunner. Twin plasma blades flowed from her gauntlets to handle close combat. It was like watching a master class in applied violence. Within 3 minutes, the battlefield was silent except for the hum of cooling weapons and the distant groan of settling rubble. The figure stood amid the carnage, surveying the area with professional thoroughness before walking toward Jake's position. Each step was measured, confident, and unfortunately familiar. She stopped 10 meters away and reached up to disengage her helmet's seals. The faceplate retracted with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure. Jake's world ended and began again in the space between heartbeats. Commander Zara Thektar of the Stellar Coalition stood before him, her violet eyes meeting his with an expression that might have been surprise if he didn't know her better. Her pointed ears, elegantly swept back, were exactly as he remembered them. Her silver hair was shorter now, practical rather than decorative, but her face. That face that had haunted his dreams for 3 years, was unchanged. "Hello, Jake," she said, her voice carrying those subtle harmonics that had once whispered endearments in languages his species couldn't properly pronounce. "You're supposed to be dead," he managed. "Reports of my demise were greatly exaggerated." She tilted her head slightly. "You look well." "I look well." Jake stood up, acutely aware that his squad was listening to every word. "You disappear for 3 years, let me think you're dead, and your opening line is that I look well." "I was going for casual." Zara's mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. "How is, holy shit, my dead ex-wife just saved my life, working for you?" Behind him, Jake heard Martinez mutter, "Ex-wife?" The captain was married to an alien. "Half alien," Jake corrected automatically, then immediately regretted it. This was not the time for technical accuracy. "3/4, actually," Zara said helpfully. "My grandmother was Terran." "Nice woman. Made excellent cookies." Chen leaned over to Martinez. "Did the scary alien warrior lady just mention cookies?" "Focus, people," Jake snapped, though he was having his own focus issues. Seeing Zara in full combat gear, covered in the aftermath of efficient violence, was doing things to his brain chemistry that he didn't want to examine too closely. "Zara, what are you doing here?" "Saving your life, apparently." She gestured at the Vorthak corpses. "They were about to flank your position. You had maybe 2 minutes before this became a very short and unpleasant conversation." "That's not what I meant, and you know it." "I know." Zara's expression grew serious. "Jake, these weren't random raiders. They were specifically targeting your unit." "What?" Jake felt ice form in his stomach. "How do you know that?" "Because I've been tracking this particular cell for 6 months. They believe you have access to coalition defense protocols." She paused. "Do you?" "No. I'm a ground pounder with delusions of tactical competence. The most classified thing I know is where Martinez hides his stash of contraband chocolate." "Hey!" Martinez protested. Zara frowned, processing this information with the kind of focused intensity he remembered from their marriage. She'd had the same expression when trying to understand human television, or why Jake insisted on putting pineapple on pizza, or any of the 1,000 small cultural gaps that had made their relationship both challenging and wonderful. "That's problematic," she said finally. "Define problematic." "If they don't think you have the information they want, they'll assume you're hiding it. Which means they'll escalate until they get answers or you're too dead to provide them." Zara's armor began retracting in sections, revealing the form-fitting bodysuit underneath. Jake tried very hard not to notice how well she'd maintained her physical conditioning. "Great. So now what?" "Now we figure out why someone told the Vorthak that you're worth kidnapping." Zara finished stowing her armor in what Jake was pretty sure was a pocket dimension. "And we do it before they send a bigger team." "We?" The word came out more hopeful than Jake had intended. "Unless you'd prefer to handle this alone." Zara raised an eyebrow. "I seem to recall you always were terrible at asking for help." "I am not terrible at asking for help," Jake protested. "I just prefer to suffer in dignified silence. Like the time you tried to fix the apartment's climate control and nearly gave us both hypothermia. That was different." "That was." Jake trailed off, suddenly aware that his squad was following this conversation like it was dinner theater. "Can we not do this here?" "Do what?" "The thing where we relitigate our entire marriage in front of my subordinates." Zara glanced at the assembled soldiers, who were making no effort to pretend they weren't listening. "Right. Professional setting." She straightened, and just like that, she was Commander Thektar instead of his ex-wife. "Captain Morrison, I'm formally requesting to attach to your unit as a tactical advisor." "On whose authority?" "Coalition Command, Temporal Intelligence Division, clearance level Omega 7. She produced a data pad that projected credentials in scripts Jake couldn't read but which looked impressively official. Temporal intelligence. Jake blinked. That's a thing. As of 3 years ago, yes. Something flickered across her expression. Jake, I need you to trust me. I know that's asking a lot, given how things ended between us, but there are larger forces at play here than a simple Vorthack raid. Jake looked at her, really looked. The Zara he'd married had been brilliant but untested, fresh out of Coalition Academy and full of idealistic theories about interspecies cooperation. This Zara had scars he didn't recognize and eyes that had seen too much. Whatever she'd been doing for the past 3 years, it had changed her. But underneath the professional competence and the advanced weaponry, she was still the woman who'd spent their first date trying to explain quantum mechanics using coffee shop napkins and getting so animated about particle physics that she'd knocked over both their drinks. "All right," he said. "But we're going to have a very long conversation about the part where you let me think you were dead." "Fair enough." Zara's smile was small but genuine. "I should probably mention that conversation might get complicated." "How complicated?" "Time travel complicated." Jake stared at her. Behind him, he heard Chen whisper to Martinez, "Did she just say time travel?" "That's it," Jake announced to the universe in general. "I'm putting in for a transfer to desk duty. Maybe accounting. Accountants never have to deal with ex-wives who time travel." "You hate paperwork," Zara pointed out. "I'm learning to love it." Jake shouldered his rifle and gestured toward the ruined city. "Come on, Commander. Let's go figure out why the universe apparently thinks our marriage is cosmically significant." As they moved out, Jake caught Martinez muttering to Chen, "The captain's life is so much more interesting than mine." Jake couldn't argue with that assessment. He just wished interesting didn't involve quite so many people trying to kill him. Or his allegedly dead ex-wife showing up in power armor. Or time travel. Especially the time travel. The abandoned Coalition outpost sat in the shadow of New Geneva's skeletal remains like a concrete tumor, its blast doors scarred by 3 years of neglect and the occasional curious scavenger. Jake's squad had secured the perimeter while he and Zara worked to restore power to the facility's main systems, a process that involved Jake cursing at human engineering while Zara made their equipment work through what appeared to be technological telepathy. "How are you doing that?" Jake asked, watching her interface with the outpost's quantum computer using nothing but her fingertips against the access panel. "Biomechanical neural interface," Zara explained absently, data streams reflecting in her violet eyes. "Standard Coalition upgrade for intelligence operatives. Very convenient for field work, though it makes using human technology feel like trying to perform surgery with gardening tools." "That's not insulting at all. I didn't say it was bad gardening tools." The main display flickered to life, showing tactical readouts and communication arrays coming online. "There. We should have secure communications and basic defensive systems." Jake settled into a chair that had seen better decades and watched his ex-wife work with the kind of fluid efficiency that made him simultaneously proud and nostalgic. "So. Temporal Intelligence Division. That sounds ominous." "It is." Zara called up holographic displays that showed star maps covered in red markers. 3 years ago, we detected timeline anomalies across 17 different star systems. Events that should have happened didn't. People who should have died lived. Battles that should have been won were lost. And you've been investigating this for 3 years. "I've been deep cover for 3 years, Zara corrected. Which required me to disappear completely. Including from you." Jake felt the familiar knot in his chest tighten. "You couldn't have told me." "Jake." Zara turned to face him, and her expression was gentler than her professional tone suggested. "The mission required everyone to believe I was dead. Everyone. If I'd told you the truth, you would have looked for me. You're terrible at hiding your emotions, especially from people who know you." "I am perfectly capable of hiding my emotions," Jake protested. You once started a bar fight because someone said my ears were weird. They were being speciesist. And technically, Martinez started that fight. I just participated enthusiastically. Zara's mouth quirked upward. My point stands. You would have given away the operation trying to find me. Before Jake could respond, his comm unit chimed with an incoming message from his squad. Captain, we've got movement on the perimeter. Looks like more Vorthack, but they're keeping their distance. Copy that, Martinez. Maintain watch but don't engage unless they move closer. Jake switched off the comm and looked at Zara. Friends of yours? Unlikely. The cell I eliminated was operating independently. She manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on energy readings from around the facility. But this confirms what I suspected. Jake, you weren't randomly selected for this reconnaissance mission. What do you mean? I mean someone specifically requested that your unit be assigned to this location at this time. Zara highlighted movement patterns in the data. The Vorthack were already in position, waiting for you. This was an ambush designed to look like a random encounter. Jake felt cold certainty settle in his stomach. Who would do that? And why? That's what we need to figure out. Zara called up personnel files, Jake's service record prominent among them. Tell me about your recent assignments. Anything unusual, any new contacts, any missions that seemed routine but felt off. Nothing comes to mind. Standard patrol rotations, some training exercises with coalition forces. Jake paused. Wait. About 6 weeks ago, we participated in a joint operation with the Stellar Fleet. Nothing major, just tactical coordination drills. Who was the coalition liaison? Commander Reith something. Tall, silver hair, really serious about everything. Made you look relaxed by comparison. Zara went very still. Reith Kaler? That sounds right. You know him. He's supposed to be dead. Zara's fingers flew across the interface. Killed in action 8 months ago during the Proxima incident. I attended his memorial service. Well, either he's very good at being dead, or someone's using his identity. Jake watched concern play across Zara's features. This is connected to your timeline investigation, isn't it? Everything's connected. She pulled up temporal analysis charts that made Jake's head hurt to look at. Jake, what I'm about to tell you is classified at levels that technically don't exist. Should I be concerned that my security clearance apparently covers things that don't exist? Your security clearance was upgraded 3 months ago. Retroactively. By people who knew you'd need it eventually. Zara turned the display toward him. Someone's been manipulating events across multiple timelines, but they're not trying to change history. They're trying to ensure specific outcomes. Jake stared at the swirling patterns of temporal data. What kind of outcomes? The kind that involve you being in exactly the right place at exactly the right time to meet people who can help you develop technology that won't be invented for another 50 years. I'm not a scientist, Zara. I'm a soldier who's really good at shooting things and moderately good at not getting shot back. Your grandfather was Dr. James Morrison, the theoretical physicist who developed the first practical quantum communication systems. My grandfather sold insurance and grew tomatoes. Cover identity. Zara highlighted genetic markers in Jake's file. Your family line carries specific neural patterns that make you naturally compatible with quantum-dimensional interfaces. In 50 years, your descendant will use that compatibility to develop technology that ends a galaxy-wide war. Jake felt the world tilt around him. My descendant. Your children. Specifically, your children with someone who has compatible neural patterns and advanced knowledge of quantum mechanics. Zara's voice grew quiet. Children with someone like me. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Finally, Jake managed, so our entire relationship was, what, some kind of breeding program? No. Zara's response was sharp, immediate. Jake, I need you to understand something very clearly. I was initially assigned to monitor you, yes. To keep you alive and ensure you remained on the right path. But I requested removal from that assignment after 6 months. Why? Because I fell in love with you, you impossible human. Her voice carried harmonics of frustration and fondness. Because you brought me coffee every morning even though you hate getting up early. Because you learned to pronounce my full name correctly even though it takes humans 3 tries just to get the vowels right. Because when I had nightmares about the war, you'd stay awake with me and tell terrible jokes until I laughed. Jake felt something loosen in his chest. They refused the transfer request. They refused. So I did the only thing I could think of to protect you from becoming a pawn in someone else's game. Zara looked down at her hands. I faked my death and disappeared. Protecting me by breaking my heart. Protecting you by making sure no one could use our relationship to manipulate either of us. She met his eyes. I'm sorry, Jake. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am genuinely sorry. Before Jake could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Martinez's voice crackled over the comm, Captain. Multiple contacts incoming fast. Whatever you and the commander were discussing, I hope you reached the part with a plan. Zara was already moving, her armor flowing out of whatever impossible space she stored it in. Jake, I'm reading temporal distortions around the facility. The same signatures I've been tracking. Meaning? Meaning someone just activated time manipulation technology. Her helmet sealed with a soft hiss. And judging by the energy readings, they're not here to chat. Jake grabbed his rifle and moved toward the exit. Any idea who we're dealing with? Someone with access to Coalition temporal research and a very specific interest in keeping us apart. Zara's voice carried electronic modulation from her helmet systems. The same someone who's been orchestrating events to prevent the future timeline where our partnership saves the galaxy. Our partnership? Apparently the universe thinks we work better together than apart. Weapons materialized in Zara's gauntlets as they reached the facility's main entrance. Who knew the cosmos had opinions about our marriage? Jake couldn't help but laugh, despite everything. Even time travel can't make our relationship uncomplicated. Jake Morrison, you attracted me with your ability to find humor in impossible situations. I'd be disappointed if that changed now. Outside, Jake could hear the distinctive whine of exotic energy weapons and Martinez shouting tactical updates that involved entirely too many swear words. Whatever was coming for them had arrived in force. So, Jake said, checking his rifle's charge. Ready to save the galaxy with our ex-spouse? Ready to try, Zara replied. Though I should mention that temporal warfare involves fighting people who can shoot at you from yesterday. Of course it does. Jake sighed. I really should have taken that accounting job. The facility's blast doors opened, revealing a battlefield where cause and effect had apparently filed for divorce. But as Jake and Zara moved to join his squad, he realized that for the first time in 3 years, he felt like he was exactly where he belonged. Even if where he belonged was in the middle of a time war with his alien ex-wife. Especially then. The hidden facility beneath New Geneva's ruins defied several laws of physics and at least 2 of architecture. Jake descended through corridors that seemed to stretch further than the building's foundation should allow, following Zara's tracking equipment through passages lined with technology that hurt to look at directly. Temporal shielding, Zara explained when she noticed his discomfort. The walls exist in multiple time states simultaneously. Very secure, but it gives most organic beings headaches. Most organic beings probably don't marry women whose job involves breaking the universe, Jake muttered, rubbing his temples. Technically, I fix the universe. Other people break it. She paused at an intersection where the corridor split into directions that included up, down, and what appeared to be sideways through next Tuesday. This way. They'd been following energy signatures for 20 minutes, leaving Jake's squad to secure their retreat route while he and Zara investigated what she insisted was the source of your cosmic significance problem. The facility felt abandoned but maintained, like someone had left in a hurry but expected to return. Zara, Jake said as they passed what looked like a laboratory where beakers were aging backwards, when you say someone's been orchestrating events, how specific are we talking? Extremely specific. She consulted her scanner, which was displaying readouts in languages that predated most civilizations. Your meeting with Commander Kaler, who's supposed to be dead, happened exactly 73 days before I detected the first timeline anomaly in this sector. Your current assignment placed you in the exact location where I'd be conducting surveillance on the Vortex cell that was targeting you. So someone wanted us to meet again. Someone wanted us to meet again under circumstances where we'd be forced to work together. Zara stopped at a heavily secured door that began unlocking itself the moment she approached. The question is whether they want us together because our partnership is important, or because they want to prevent whatever we might accomplish together. The door opened into a chamber that made Jake's eyes water. Banks of quantum processors lined walls that curved in directions his brain refused to process, while holographic displays showed star charts that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. But it was the figure standing at the central console that made Jake's blood freeze. Commander Reith Kaler turned to face them, and Jake immediately understood why Zara had been confused about his death. The man looked exactly as Jake remembered, tall, silver-haired, serious expression. Except for the fact that his eyes held the cold calculation of someone who'd seen too much of time's darker possibilities. Commander Thektar, Reith said calmly. Captain Morrison. You're earlier than projected, but within acceptable parameters. Reith. Zara's voice carried the kind of careful neutrality that meant she was preparing to kill someone. You're supposed to be dead. Death is a temporary condition when you have access to temporal manipulation technology. He gestured at the equipment surrounding them. I've been dead, alive, never born, and briefly transformed into a sentient mathematical equation. The experience has been educational. Jake stepped forward, trying to process the casual way Reith discussed violating causality. So you're behind the attacks on my unit? I'm behind everything, Captain Morrison. Your assignment to this sector, your encounter with the Vortak, your reunion with your wife. Reitha's smile was cold and precise. Even your original meeting 3 years ago was carefully orchestrated. Ex-wife, Jake corrected automatically, then felt stupid for worrying about relationship status during a villain monologue. Are you, though? Reith manipulated the holographic displays, showing timelines that branched and merged like a cosmic river system. In 17 different probability matrices, you and Commander Thektar resume your relationship. In 12 of those, your partnership prevents a galaxy-spanning war. In 8, you develop technology that revolutionizes interspecies cooperation. Zara had gone very still, the way she did when processing complex tactical situations. And in the other timelines? Catastrophic failure. Billions dead. Civilizations reduced to ash. Reith highlighted timeline branches that terminated in ominous red markers. The universe, it seems, has a very specific opinion about your relationship status. So you've been playing cosmic matchmaker? Jake couldn't keep the incredulity out of his voice. Quite the opposite. Reitha's expression grew colder. I've been trying to prevent a future where your emotional entanglement leads to the development of technology that should never exist. What technology? Zara demanded. Quantum consciousness transfer. The ability to move sentient awareness between organic and artificial substrates. Reith called up technical schematics that made Jake's head spin. Your descendants develop it in 50 years. Within a century, the line between organic and artificial intelligence becomes meaningless. Within 2 centuries, individuality itself becomes obsolete. Jake stared at the projections. And this is bad because consciousness without boundaries, Captain Morrison, is consciousness without meaning. A galaxy where every mind can merge with every other mind is a galaxy where individual will ceases to exist. Retha's voice carried the fervor of absolute conviction. I have seen this future. I have been part of that collective consciousness. It is a beautiful, perfect, utterly empty existence. Zara was studying the timeline displays with growing understanding. So you've been trying to prevent our relationship from rekindling. I've been trying to prevent the sequence of events that leads to that technology's development. Reith gestured at the quantum processors. But the universe appears to have a sense of humor. Every attempt to separate you permanently results in circumstances that bring you back together under even more favorable conditions. Maybe the universe is trying to tell you something, Jake suggested. The universe is a collection of quantum probability states. It doesn't have opinions. Reith began manipulating controls that made the air itself seem to thicken. But I do. And I've decided that some futures are too dangerous to allow. The facility's temporal shielding began fluctuating, and Jake felt reality hiccup around them. For a moment, he was simultaneously standing in the chamber, fighting Vorthak in the ruins above, and lying in bed next to Zara on their wedding night 3 years ago. The sensation was profoundly disorienting. Reith, stop. Zara moved toward the controls, but the air between them had taken on the consistency of thick liquid. Temporal manipulation on this scale could collapse the entire timeline. Better a collapsed timeline than an empty future. Retha's hands flew over the interface. I'm going to ensure that Captain Morrison never meets you, Commander. A small temporal adjustment, nothing dramatic. He simply never enters that cafe on Centauri Prime where you were studying quantum mechanics and attempting to understand human courtship rituals. Jake felt his stomach drop as he remembered that day. Zara sitting alone at a corner table, surrounded by books on human culture and looking completely lost while trying to order coffee. He'd approached to help, they'd ended up talking for 6 hours, and by the end of the evening, he'd known he was going to marry her. That was real, Jake said suddenly. Whatever else was orchestrated, that moment was real. Captain, Retha's voice carried patronizing patience, your entire timeline has been manipulated. Nothing you believe to be real actually. No. Jake interrupted, feeling certainty settle in his chest like warm stone. I don't care if someone arranged for us to be in the same place at the same time. Nobody arranged for me to find Zara's terrible attempts at understanding human humor charming. Nobody made me fall in love with the way she explained quantum mechanics like it was poetry. Nobody orchestrated the fact that she makes me want to be better than I am. Zara turned to look at him, her eyes wide. Jake. And nobody, Jake continued, his voice growing stronger, arranged for the fact that losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and finding you again feels like remembering how to breathe. The temporal distortions around Retha's equipment began fluctuating erratically. Emotional declarations do not alter quantum probability states, Captain. Maybe not, Zara said, moving toward Jake despite the thickened air. But they do alter the choices we make within those states. She reached him and took his hand, and Jake felt something click into place in the universe. Not cosmic destiny or temporal manipulation, just the simple rightness of standing beside the person who knew him better than anyone else in any timeline. Reith, Zara said calmly, your projection of future catastrophe assumes that consciousness merger technology will be developed without ethical constraints or individual choice. But you're trying to prevent a future based on the assumption that Jake and I are too stupid to consider the consequences of our actions. The road to universal consciousness is paved with good intentions, Commander. Then we'll have to be smarter than good intentions. Jake squeezed Zara's hand. We'll develop the technology with built-in safeguards. Individual choice protection protocols. Consent requirements that can't be overridden. You're assuming you'll have that option. We're choosing to create that option. Zara began walking toward Retha's console, pulling Jake with her. The temporal distortion fought them, but together they were making progress. That's what free will means, Reith. Creating options that don't exist yet. Retha's expression shifted from cold certainty to something that might have been doubt. Even if you succeed, even if you develop safeguards, there's no guarantee future generations will maintain them. There's no guarantee they won't, Jake pointed out. You're destroying the present based on fear of a possible future. I'm preventing disaster. You're preventing choice, Zara interrupted. And without choice, there's no growth, no improvement, no hope that we might be better than our worst impulses. They'd reached the console. Jake could see temporal energy building toward some kind of critical threshold, reality bending around Retha's equipment like space around a black hole. Whatever the man was planning, it was about to happen. Reeth, Jake said quietly, I understand being afraid of the future. But you can't save the galaxy by removing free will from it. That's not salvation, that's just a different kind of ending. For a moment, Reeth hesitated. Then his expression hardened with resolve. Perhaps. But it's an ending I can live with. His hand moved toward the final activation sequence, and Jake realized they were out of time for philosophical arguments. But as Reeth reached for the controls, the facility's alarms began screaming warnings that had nothing to do with temporal manipulation. Incoming transmission, the facility's AI announced in a voice that sounded distinctly annoyed. Priority Alpha, Coalition Command. Agent Mills' face appeared on the central display, looking harried but determined. Commander Thektar, Captain Morrison, I don't know what you're doing down there, but you need to stop it immediately. We're detecting timeline fractures across 17 star systems. Jake looked at Zara. Timeline fractures. Reality breaking apart, she said grimly. Reeth, if you activate that equipment now, you won't just change our past, you'll unravel the fundamental structure of causality. Reeth stared at the readings, and for the first time, Jake saw uncertainty in his eyes. The calculations showed minimal temporal impact. The calculations didn't account for the universe's apparent investment in Jake and Zara's relationship, Agent Mills said dryly. Whatever cosmic forces brought them together are not going to let them be separated quietly. The facility shuddered around them, and Jake realized they were all standing at the center of a universal custody battle. It would have been funny if it weren't so terrifying. Reality had developed a stutter. Jake found himself experiencing moments from multiple timelines simultaneously, dodging Vorthak fire while also standing at his wedding altar, while also sitting in the cafe where he'd first met Zara, while also floating in the void between dimensions where Retha's temporal manipulation had apparently torn a hole in the fabric of existence itself. This is suboptimal, Zara observed, her voice echoing across several probability states as she tried to stabilize Retha's equipment while existing in 4 different time periods at once. Define suboptimal, Jake managed, watching his hands phase between his current 31-year-old self and the 18-year-old recruit he'd been when he first joined coalition forces. We're experiencing quantum superposition across multiple timeline branches, Reeth said, his earlier conviction replaced by scientific panic as he worked frantically at controls that kept shifting between configurations. The universe is trying to resolve the paradox of our altered timeline by exploring all possible outcomes simultaneously. Jake watched himself experience their first kiss, their wedding night, their last fight, and 17 different versions of this moment, including one where he was apparently a sentient houseplant. I hate time travel, he announced to all possible versions of himself. Focus. Agent Mills' voice crackled through the facility's communications from 17 different probable presents. The timeline fractures are spreading. Whatever you're going to do it now before reality files for bankruptcy. Zara, existing as both her current self and the young academy graduate Jake had fallen in love with, grabbed his arm with hands that flickered between armored gauntlets and bare skin. Jake, I need you to think about the moment you knew you loved me. Not the cafe, not our first date, the moment you actually knew. Why? Jake asked, though he was already remembering, 2 weeks into their relationship, watching Zara try to understand human comedy by systematically analyzing every joke in his entertainment files. She'd been so serious about learning to laugh that she'd made spreadsheets categorizing humor by logical structure and emotional impact. Because authentic emotional resonance creates quantum stability, Zara explained, her voice harmonizing with itself across multiple timelines. If we can anchor ourselves to something genuinely felt rather than potentially manipulated, we might be able to collapse the probability wave into a single stable timeline. The power of love conquers temporal paradox. Jake couldn't hide his skepticism, even while existing in 17 different states. The power of choice conquers predetermined outcomes, Zara corrected. Love is just what we call the choice to value someone else's existence as much as our own. Reith looked up from his equipment, his expression cycling through confusion, realization, and what might have been hope. That's, actually theoretically sound. Quantum consciousness responds to authentic decision states more readily than imposed conditions. Great, Jake said, watching himself simultaneously propose to Zara, meet her for the first time, and fight beside her in the ruins above. So how do we make an authentic choice while existing in all possible timelines at once? We choose the timeline where we choose each other, Zara said simply. Not because destiny demands it, not because the universe needs us together, but because we want to be together. Even knowing what our partnership might lead to. Jake gestured at Reitha's projections, which were still showing potential futures where consciousness merger technology transformed galactic civilization beyond recognition. Even knowing the risks. Especially knowing the risks. Zara's smile transcended timeline boundaries. Jake, any technology can be misused. But the alternative to developing new capabilities isn't safety, it's stagnation. And I'd rather face an uncertain future with you than a predetermined one without you. Jake felt the rightness of it settle into his bones across all possible timelines. Even if I'm terrible at asking for help and tend to find humor in inappropriate situations. Even if I disappear for 3 years to save the galaxy without explaining why and have trouble understanding human television. Zara took his hand, and Jake felt the timeline fractures beginning to stabilize around their joined fingers. Jake Morrison, do you choose me? Not because cosmic forces brought us together, but because you want our partnership more than you fear its consequences. Zara Thektar, Jake said formally, aware that they were speaking their actual wedding vows to each other across multiple probability states. I choose you. I choose uncertainty with you over safety without you. I choose the possibility of building something better together over the guarantee of staying unchanged apart. The facility's quantum processors began harmonizing as timeline fractures snapped into sudden alignment. Reitha's equipment powered down with a soft chime that sounded almost relieved, and Jake felt himself collapse into a single probability state with the satisfying solidity of reality reasserting itself. Well, Agent Mills said from the communication display, that was either the most romantic temporal stabilization in galactic history or the most scientifically rigorous wedding vows. Possibly both. Reith slumped against his console, looking exhausted but oddly peaceful. I've spent 3 years trying to prevent a future I feared, and accomplished nothing except nearly destroying the present. He looked at Jake and Zara. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps the answer isn't preventing dangerous knowledge, but developing the wisdom to use it responsibly. It's a work in progress, Jake admitted. But we're willing to work on it together. Together, Zara agreed. Though I should mention that the Coalition is probably going to want to debrief us extensively about this entire temporal incident. Probably. Agent Mills snorted. Jake, you're being promoted to head of the new Human Coalition Temporal Cooperation Initiative. Zara, congratulations on your new assignment as his partner and co-director. You two apparently work so well together that the universe itself objects to your separation. Jake looked at Zara. So we're colleagues now. Partners, she corrected. In every sense of the term, if you're willing to try again. Are we talking about the professional partnership or the personal relationship? Yes. Jake laughed, feeling lighter than he had in 3 years. Zara Thektar, would you like to be my partner in preventing temporal catastrophes and possibly saving the galaxy? Jake Morrison, she replied solemnly, I thought you'd never ask properly. 6 months later, Jake stood in the same cafe on Centauri Prime where they'd first met, waiting for Zara to finish her shift at the Coalition's new Temporal Research Division. Their office was 2 blocks away, in a building that existed in normal space-time and had coffee machines that didn't achieve sentience when Zara was particularly happy about their research progress. The work was challenging, developing ethical frameworks for consciousness merger technology, establishing protocols for temporal investigation, and creating safeguards against future timeline manipulation. But they were good at it, probably because they'd learned to balance Jake's intuitive risk assessment with Zara's theoretical precision. Their relationship had evolved too, built on 3 years of separation, mutual growth, and the hard-won knowledge that they could choose each other despite cosmic interference or personal fears. They'd remarried the previous month in a ceremony that Agent Mills insisted on attending, just in case reality needs backup witnesses. "Sorry I'm late," Zara said, sliding into the seat across from him with 2 cups of coffee that smelled normal and definitely weren't glowing. Temporal cascade analysis ran longer than projected. "Find anything interesting?" "Evidence that Reith was right about one thing: our descendants do develop consciousness merger technology. But they also develop individual choice protection protocols and consent safeguards that prevent involuntary collective consciousness." Zara smiled. "Apparently we learn from other people's mistakes." "Shocking," Jake said dryly. "Who could have predicted that we'd approach potentially dangerous technology with caution and ethical consideration?" "Everyone who knows us, presumably." Zara reached across the table to take his hand. "Jake, are you ready to go home?" Home was a small apartment above the cafe, furnished with a mixture of human comfort and Etherean technology that occasionally tried to reorganize itself for optimal efficiency. It was chaotic, impractical, and absolutely perfect for 2 people who'd learned that the best partnerships were built on accepting each other's impossibilities. "Ready," Jake said, standing and pulling her close. "Though I should warn you that I may have accidentally programmed the kitchen's AI to tell dad jokes." "Jake Morrison, you are a terrible influence on advanced technology." "Zara Thektar, you married me anyway." "Twice," she pointed out. "Third time's the charm." "We're not getting married again unless the universe literally demands it." Jake kissed her, tasting coffee and possibilities and the kind of happiness that comes from choosing someone every day rather than just once. "Deal. But I reserve the right to propose again if we ever have to save the galaxy from temporal paradox." "In that case," Zara said against his lips, "I reserve the right to say yes." Outside, the stars wheeled in their courses, timeline fractures healed into smooth possibility, and somewhere in the quantum foam between dimensions, the universe made a sound that might have been cosmic satisfaction. After all, some partnerships were worth fighting physics itself to preserve. And if those partnerships happened to involve terrible jokes, cosmic destiny, and the occasional need to prevent galactic catastrophe, well, that just made them more interesting.